Hey, fourth graders, Miss Griswold again. Hope you guys are still staying safe and healthy. I'm missing you guys so much, even more and more as every week goes by. I hope you guys had a long weekend though. Today I'm with you to read another story, and I'm really excited about this one today. Today I'm going to read a fiction text titled A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon, and it's one of my favorite books. When we read this type of genre, we know that when we read fiction, that we should remember that once again, there are a setting, there are characters that are made up, and then some events in a fictional story may not actually be able to happen in real life, which makes reading fiction so much fun. We also know that when we read fiction, that there, along with the setting and characters and made up events, there's a problem and solution that follow a plot line. In today's story, the main character, Camilla Cream, loves lima beans, but she never really eats them. She doesn't eat them because other kids in her school don't like them, and Camilla Cream is really worried about what other people think of her. In fact, she's so worried that she's about to break out in a bad case of stripes. I want you to think about a time that you felt like you didn't want to do something. What happened as a result of that? Were there any consequences, either good or bad? From, I want you to pause this video and take a second to think about if you ever had an experience like that. Remembering how you felt about a time like that will help you better understand how those events in your life are connected to other certain things that happen. Today, when we read our story, take a look at our learning goal. Today, I can describe the sequence of events in a narrative by identifying cause and effect relationships so that I can understand how story events are connected. So let's take a look at some of these words. We know describe means to tell in detail. And then we're going to see this phrase, sequence of events. And that simply just means that those events that happen in order, one after another after another. You guys have seen cause and effect relationships before, but let's look at a reminder that that word cause is the thing that makes an event happen. Okay, and the effect is the change that one thing causes on another. All right. And then we're going to see how the story events are connected, which just simply means related. So as we're reading today, our goal is to identify the events that happen and the changes that happen because of those previous events. That way we can really understand how the story events are all related and connected. And if we look at those cause and effect relationships, we'll really understand why certain things happen in a story. Today, when we read our story, we're going to come across a word, and it's the word lima beans. And a lot of you may know this, some of you may not, but I just wanted to tell you that lima beans are a small little green vegetable that is a bean. So that's all that is when we get to that word. So as we're reading today, I want you to keep in your mind those cause and effect relationships that we might see. You guys, when you are doing your work provided by your teacher, you're going to see a chart or an organizer that looks just like this. And you notice that it'll say story event, which is the effect, and why did the event happen, which is the cause. So as you guys might think about cause and effect, you might think of them flip-flopped, and normally you might see the cause on this side and the effect on this side. But in fourth grade, it's a little bit different because we want to see what happens and what caused that. So why did that event happen? So I wanted to show you guys this organizer so you don't get confused when you're doing it on your own in your work that was given to you from your teacher. So I figured we would do an organizer together while we're reading to help you get a little bit of practice. So bear with me as I pull up the story on my screen again. A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed. Her mother ran into the room and she screamed too. "Oh my heavens!" she cried. "You're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered, "but just look at me." "You get back in bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary!" he exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camilla told him. "I feel fine." "Well then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and the Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard," and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon, everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. So let's take a second to think. Have you found any cause and effect relationships so far in the story? I'm going to give you a second to just think for a minute, and I want you to maybe pause this video so you can give yourself the time that you need. Hopefully you guys took some time to think about that. I'm going to bring us back to our organizer, and let's think about an event that happened in the story. Well, right now, we know one thing that happened at the very beginning of the story is that Camilla didn't eat her lima beans. That was one of the first things that they mentioned in the story that happened. So I want us to think to ourselves, why did that event happen? What caused her to not eat her lima beans? Well, if we go back and think, we know that she wanted to fit in. She said nobody else in her class ate lima beans, so she didn't want to either. So the event that happened that caused her to not eat them is that she wanted to fit in. Good. Another event that happened after that, let's go back to our text. We know what was happening on these two pages when she started changing colors. Good. We know that other kids were making fun of her. Good. So the story event, the effect is that her classmates made fun of her for changing so many patterns and colors. So what caused that? Why did the event happen? Well, we know because she had a case of the stripes. She had a case of the stripes. We're not really sure what that is yet, but we know that because she was changing so many colors, her classmates were really making fun of her. So as we're reading, let's see if you guys can find any other cause and effect relationships. And I want you to think about how the story events are connected with each other. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, that night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from the other parents. They're afraid those stripes might be contagious." Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago, everyone liked her. Now, nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Well, yes, I see, Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. I think I'd better bring in the specialists. We'll be right over. About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. This is Dr. Grapp, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young. Then the specialists went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Grapp. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not chicken pox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialists. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. "Take one of each before bed," said Dr. Grapp. Then they filed out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. Look at all those different patterns on her, and then poking and prodding her. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. Oh my goodness, look at her now. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called. But this time, instead of the specialists, he brought the experts. Dr. Gourd and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gourd finally spoke. "It might be a virus," he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. "Or possibly some form of bacteria," said Mr. Mellon. "Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails." "Or it could be a fungus," added Dr. Gourd. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different colored fungus splotches. The experts looked at Camilla, then at each other. "We need to go over these numbers again back at the lab," Dr. Gourd explained. "We'll call you when we know something." But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. So let's stop right there. Are there any other cause and effect relationships that you have found in this book? I'm going to give you a second to pause, maybe rewind, and see if you can find 2 cause and effect relationships so far. Hopefully you guys were thinking about those important events that happen in the story, because we know that when we're looking at about how story events are connected, we're thinking about the important events. So after her classmates made fun of her, what is something that happened? What is an event? Well, I know that after I went back and looked, the next thing that happened was that Camilla got sent home from school. All right, so why did that event happen? What caused her to get sent home from school? Well, we know the principal said that she was too much of a distraction, and other kids' parents thought that she was contagious. All right, so I'm going to say she was too much of a distraction, and other parents thought her illness was contagious. Okay, what happened after that? What was another event that happened? Well, we know that she was turning into all different types of things. If we go back into the text, we know that once she was sent home, the specialists came over. All right, she turned into a pill bottle, and then she was turning into the fungus, the bacteria, making sure I get the right words, and the virus. Okay, so don't want to go forward. So those are some things that happen. So what is the story event? Camilla turned into a pill bottle, virus, fungus, and bacteria. Okay, well, what caused that to happen? Good. We know is that the specialists and experts came to her house to look at her. So if the specialists and experts came to look at her, Then she turned into that pill bottle, the virus, the fungus, and bacteria. If they didn't come to look at her, do you think she would have turned into the pill bottle or the virus or the fungus or the bacteria? Probably not, because those words might not have been used if they didn't see her. Let's continue reading to see if we can find any more events that happened and what caused them. By now, the TV news have found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house, telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. The creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and long furry tail, but nothing worked. Ugh, poor Camilla. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. "Close your eyes," she said, "breathe deeply, and become one with your room." "Oh, I wish you hadn't said that," Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose was a dresser, and two paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. "What are we going to do?" cried Mrs. Cream. "It just keeps getting worse and worse." She began to sob. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and as sweet as a strawberry. "Excuse me," she said brightly, "but I think I can help." She went into Camilla's room and looked around. "My goodness," she said with a shake of her head, what we have here is a bad case of stripes, one of the worst I've ever seen." She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. "Here," she said, "these might do the trick." "Are those magic beans?" asked Mrs. Cream. "Oh my, no," replied the kind old woman. "There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you'd like some, wouldn't you?" she asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big heaping plateful of lima beans more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. "Yuck," she said. "No one likes lima beans, especially me." "Oh dear," the old woman said sadly. "I guess I was wrong about you." She put the beans back in her bag and started toward the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. "Wait," she cried. "The truth is, I really love lima beans." "I thought so," the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. "Mmm," said Camilla. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. "I'm cured," she shouted. "Yes," said the old woman. "I knew the real you was in there somewhere." She patted Camilla on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterward, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had even a touch of stripes again. All right, so now that we've finished, let's think about the important events that happen, because we know if we're looking at our learning goal, we're describing the sequence of events by identifying the cause and effect relationships. So far we've talked about the important events. What were the important events that happened after Camilla turned into the pill bottle, the fungus, and the bacteria? What I want you to do once again is I want you to pause, rewind the video, and tell me the last three important events and why did those events happen? What were those causes? I want you to pause this video and really challenge your brain and try to come up with those on your own. And come back to me when you're finished. All right, guys, as you see, I have a completed organizer, and hopefully the events that we have on the organizer here were the events that you thought about at home. So we know that after Camilla was turning into the virus, the fungi, and the pill bottle, after that, the TV reporter set out in front of Camilla's old house. And why did that happen? What caused that? Well, word got out about her illness and people wanted to see what was happening. After that, the old lady came to the house and gave Camilla lima beans to eat. Well, what caused that? She wanted to help cure Camilla's illness. She thought she knew why Camilla had the bad case of the stripes. And then at the very end, the very last event that happened was Camilla turned back into her old self. So what caused that? Why did that event happen? Well, she ate the lima beans and continued to eat them, and she didn't care about what others thought anymore. So because of that, that final event happened that she turned back into her old self again. So these were some of those cause and effect relationships that we found throughout the story. So we know that we can describe the sequence of events in a narrative by identifying cause and effect relationships. All right, well, you guys have done that, but now we need to take it a step further and understand how the story events are connected. You guys see me looking down, I'm looking back down at the learning goal, just like we have here. So let's see how the story events are connected. My question for you is I want you to take a look at these cause and effect relationships that we just identified together. And I want you to really think, what events led to Camilla catching her illness? And what caused her to cure her illness? Okay, I want you to think about what we talked about and really think about how these story events are connected. I'm going to post this question or these two questions in Schoology where I'm posting this video. It'll be a discussion post right underneath. All right, so I want you to answer those two questions using the organizer with these cause and effect relationships. Once you post, I can respond to you, give you feedback to really help you with this assignment. This will be good practice to help you with the assignment that's in the packet. Okay, so I'm really looking forward to discussing with you on Schoology and seeing your responses. I can't wait to see you guys next week. Have fun. Good luck.